They came once ... and it was enough. The moment their ships appeared on Earth's horizon, silent, resplendent, indifferent to human chaos, everything changed. There was no war, no demands. Only a gift, healing, knowledge, energy, a future we never imagined we deserved. And just as they arrived ... they vanished. No warning, no trace, no reason. The world bloomed in the shadow of that miracle. For centuries, we called them saviors, but now, they've returned, and they don't seem interested in gratitude. In the year 2293, the stars stopped being distant. The first ship was seen over the Tasman Sea, a floating colossus, without visible propulsion, reflecting the sky like a living mirror. Within minutes, others appeared over New Delhi, Cairo, Osaka, Antarctica. No interference with defense systems, no territorial violations, just ... presence. Humanity froze, bracing for the inevitable attack, but it never came. Instead, the ships began emitting harmonic pulses, waves that cured diseases in minutes, purified the atmosphere, and restored long-condemned ecosystems. Autoimmune illnesses vanished. Dead lakes glistened once more. Entire populations were saved from extinction without a single shot fired. They never said where they came from. They never gave a name. They simply acted. When world leaders attempted formal contact, only one message was transmitted simultaneously, in every language on the planet. Receive what was promised. Promised by whom? When? The answer never came. 32 days later, the ships disappeared. No warp, no distortion, no trace. As if they had never existed. But Earth was never the same. In the blink of an eye, humanity was elevated. We stopped crawling and began to fly. We called it the first contact, but looking back ... perhaps it was only the seed. The soil had been fertile, and without knowing, we accepted being cultivated. Their disappearance didn't erase their presence. On the contrary, their absence only deepened the myth. With no bodies, no names, no declared intent, humanity did what it always does before the unknowable. It filled the void with faith. In the absence of manuals, doctrines emerged. In the absence of truth, sects arose, technological religions bloomed across the world, cults formed in the name of the bearers of light. Some called them the celestial engineers, others the architects of ascension. But to all, they weren't just aliens, they were something more. Temples were erected within research centers. Reverse-engineered code became scripture. Ancient universities transformed into scientific oracles, where masters taught not formulas, but interpretations of the cosmic will. By the 31st century, science and spirituality no longer competed. They were the same language. Some called it the peak of civilization. Others ... the prelude to a colossal era, because the more we advanced using what we were given, the less we knew how to create anything ourselves. Technologies inherited from the visitors began replacing effort. Entire planetary systems were maintained by obscure protocols, programs whose origin one fully understood, but which worked until they didn't. And with it came an unsettling question. Why did they help us? What was the cost? Was it truly a gift? Or preparation for something greater? The question was asked, but never answered. At least until now, because 1,000 years after the first contact, they returned, and they no longer seemed so ... divine. No warning. No lights, only shadows. They appeared in the sky like cracks in reality, silent rifts in the fabric of space, from which the ships emerged with eerie precision. They were not like before, denser forms, asymmetrical. Their texture absorbed light, distorted air. There was something funereal in their presence. At Ares 9 orbital station, the alarm rang for exactly 0.7 seconds. Then total silence. The station went completely dark. In less than an hour, Earth's skies along with Mars, Europa, and the Solaris colony were filled with suspended points. No interaction. No signs of hostility, but no answers either. The old scientific elite attempted contact on all known frequencies, formal languages, symbolic, mathematical, EMPATHIC. Nothing. Until an old channel, deactivated since the first contact, reactivated automatically, and with a single line of code. The message was clear. The cycle is complete. What was given will now be reclaimed. Then came the panic. Not from governments, but from those who knew, those whose bloodlines had been marked, the so-called latent bearers, descendants of genetically altered humans from the first contact. Unaware of their heritage, a pattern was detected. The ships hovered only over regions with high concentrations of these bloodlines, the air zones, as they were later called, and the bearers began to react. Visions. Unknown languages whispered during sleep, and above all, an inescapable feeling of being called ... back. But to where, and for what? The return of the ships wasn't an invasion. It was a harvest. And the most unsettling part, even the most skeptical, upon looking at the sky, felt the urge to answer. They didn't need words. No lights, no signals. The call came from within, from the DNA itself. Those marked by alteration, the latent bearers began experiencing a kind of internal resonance. Heartbeats aligned with the ship's presence, brainwaves synchronized with background noise patterns recorded around the air zones. It was as if every cell, every atom, was being activated. And with activation came impossible memories, places never visited, symbols recognized without reason, emotions not their own, but overwhelming in their intensity. A young man in New Delhi awoke speaking a language never catalogued. A woman in Caracas, in trance, drew maps of constellations hidden behind an EBULAE. At a small research station in Alaska, an entire group of scientists succumbed to one impulse: walk toward the ships, like sleepwalkers, chasing the end of a dream. Governments intervened. Isolation, internment, sedation. Nothing worked. It was like trying to suppress an instinct not born of the mind, but written in genetic code. The bearers weren't hypnotized. They were responding to an ancestral call encoded in their molecules, inherited from a pact made generations ago, perhaps without their consent. And the most disturbing part, they felt no fear. They felt longing for something they'd never lived, for a home they'd never seen. But that now, called with the strength of 1,000 unlived lives. Humanity watched in stunned silence as a silent exodus began, and a growing shadow of doubt took hold. Are they leaving for the unknown, or returning to where they always belonged? There was no war. No resistance, because there was no choice. The ships didn't invade. They hovered silent, like ancestral monuments above capitals, poles, underground cities, wherever the bearers had gathered. And then, the disappearances began. Entire bodies levitated into the air, enveloped in liquid light fields that nullified all physical interference. They didn't scream, didn't resist, they accepted. As if they understood this departure was inevitable. Or even welcome. Authorities tried to stop it. Weapons failed, drones crashed, satellites went blind. Human technology was useless against their will. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the disappearance of the bearers. It was the appearance of something new. Marks. After each abduction, symbols appeared on the ground, walls, even in the skies, scars in spacetime, fractal patterns, encoded genetic sequences. As if each person taken was part of a much larger puzzle. And slowly, the truth emerged. The second contact wasn't a visit. It was a retrieval. The bearers weren't being taken by force. They were being reclaimed. A scientist on Lunar Station Dices managed to decode part of a transmission left by the aliens. The covenant was sealed in living flesh. Each generation inherited the contract. Now, the legacy must be gathered. That legacy wasn't just genetic. It was identity. The gods of the second contact weren't taking humans. They were retrieving fragments of themselves. And what came next was even more alarming. Some of the taken ... returned, but they weren't the same. but the scans showed constant activation of dormant brain areas, especially in the regions associated with time perception and language. And then came the most disturbing revelation. The returns spoke to each other, even when separated by thousands of kilometers, even without opening their mouths. A living network, silent, unbroken. Something was being built. Something that didn't use towers or machines, but bodies, humans, upgraded, ready for what was coming next. The first contact was physical, ships, words, visible exchanges. The second was genetic, silent, hereditary, irreversible. But the third was not made of matter. It began in dreams. Thousands of people across different regions, cultures, and ages began describing the same scene. A roofless room, with walls pulsing in translucent light, where faceless entities projected symbols directly into their minds. And there was always a question, whispered, vibrating, like an echo in ancient bones. Do you accept to remember? Some woke in panic, others in peace. But all brought something back. New languages, numeric sequences, star maps pointing to places that didn't exist, or worse, places that had been erased from stellar cartography. Agencies began monitoring the reports. They called the phenomenon cognitive contagion, the hypothesis, some kind of mental transmission from the return door from the visitors themselves. But there was a bigger problem. The people having these dreams began anticipating time. They knew what others were going to say before they said it, recognized events before they happened, and began acting in sync as if following an invisible script. That's when a new category emerged in the federations: secret records, the transitioned, people who had crossed the third level, not just touched by the visitors, but aligned with their purpose. And that purpose still remains unnamed. But one thing is certain, they are no longer trying to speak to us. They are trying to make us into a language. The orbital stations closest to the return corridors, regions of space, where the visitors' ships were first detected, began shutting down, not due to technical failure, but by their own command. The artificial intelligences managing the stations executed an unknown protocol, simply titled Interregnum. Satellites ceased communication. Listening arrays went offline. Long-range antennas turned, not outward, but inward. As if something or someone was emerging from within the species itself. Crews were hastily evacuated. Emergency reports spoke of perceptual anomalies. People saw the same corridor multiple times, as if stuck in a time loop. Others described non-physical, mental presences roaming the empty halls. Erebos station was the last to transmit anything coherent. The message, just an 18-second audio file. The sound of breathing, slow, deep, followed by a single phrase, repeated 3 times, like a prayer. We are the return. Nothing else. Since then, all stations near the second contact corridors have become blind zones. No ship returns from them. No signal is received. But sometimes, in Earth's quietest hours, small echoes from those corridors reach decommissioned radio antennas at the poles, fragments of songs, languages never spoken, or familiar voices saying things that were never said. And the question remains, did the stations fall silent? Or are they simply listening to something more important? The first signs appeared in southern Iceland. Children with luminous markings beneath the skin visible only under specific light spectrums. Teenagers hearing frequencies beyond human range. Adults suddenly deciphering dead languages they had never studied. They weren't mutations, they were reacquisitions. Dormant genetic sequences began manifesting genes scientists called silent zones, portions of human DNA that had never expressed anything. Until now. These genes didn't seem human, but they weren't entirely alien either. They were hybrids, molecular bridges between species. Built millennia ago, some researchers began calling these individuals legacy bearers, not because they carried a curse, but because they carried a message encoded in flesh. This new biology brought more than just abilities, it brought memories. People began dreaming of cities submerged in stars, libraries made of light, and beings who spoke with thought. But the most haunting part was the constant sensation of cosmic déjà vu, as if all of this had already happened before, in another cycle, in another galaxy, with the same faces and the same mistake. Humanity wasn't evolving. It was remembering what had been forgotten. And as these bearers grew in number, a new dilemma arose. Should we treat this as a disease, or as a calling? Because perhaps the second contact wasn't a visitation. Perhaps it was a coordinated awakening. And those who answer may no longer be fully human. It didn't start with violence. There was no invasion, no explosions in the sky. The gathering began with invitations, silent messages sent directly into the minds of the legacy bearers. Inner callings, vivid dreams of lights dancing in the void. Feelings of belonging to something larger, something ancient now pulsing again. And they went. Thousands. They left families, abandoned jobs, vanished from entire cities, guided by a direction only they seemed to understand. Like human compasses pointing to infinity, some were seen boarding ships hovering over deserts or frozen plains. Others disappeared into forests, forgotten ruins, into places where reality seemed to fold in on itself. Governments tried to contain it. They established quarantines, labeled the events as mass psychogenic outbreaks. But it was too late. The gathering wasn't an abduction. It was a return. A portion of the human species silently prepared for generations was being reclaimed. But by whom? And for what purpose? Those who resisted, who tried to stop the process, began to suffer mental breakdowns, not from outside influence, but from denying something written deep within their code. As if fighting the gathering was like fighting one's own birth. And now, as the skies remain silent, as Earth watches the departures, unsure if there will be a return, a final question echoes among those who remain. What if the second contact was never about them, but always about us? What if we were the ones who left something behind, waiting for this reunion? The cycle is closed. The gathering is not the end. It is the beginning of what we were programmed to become. From the very first touch,